need the basics, whether it's email and calendaring, instant messaging and the ability to just chat online. It could be voice calling, or one of the bigger ones as well is the ability to easily share files and collaborate, both internally inside of Microserve and with our clients and our partners as well. Now, the one piece that we have as well as being a service provider is that we also have demands for a highly available contact center solution and for our teams like our help desk and dispatch teams, for example. And lastly, I think the big piece I'd highlight is that we need devices that just work to do all these things well. We can't really afford anymore to be spending hours and hours troubleshooting driver issues with our images as new models evolve and the sound's not working right, or whatever that case might be. So essentially, we really need to change our focus to be able to focus on empowering our staff and giving them the tools that ultimately makes them successful. So if we go back, not all that long ago, really, if I draw it up, the first thing I'd highlight is we really had no centralized hub for information. Our officially supported platforms were an aging SharePoint environment that was on premise, and many teams did leverage that. However, we still had a good chunk of our company that was on the good old traditional file servers on premise as well. Now, we really also had tool sprawl. So whether it was somebody on our exec team going out and buying licensing for Dropbox so that they could work from home or collaborate easier, or whether it was some of our teams that were client-facing, leveraging clients' tools like Google Docs, for example. So as you can imagine, this sort of creates a state where there's a lot of information in a lot of different places, hard to potentially find. Now, what this also means is usually collaboration is doing something like sending attachments over email back and forth and editing it and sending it back up. Version control was done by, I hate to say it, the good old file renaming of adding V1, NV, V2, and so on. So it really didn't lend itself well to that sort of instant collab experience. And I think a really good example of that is, a big part of our roles, as an IT organization are doing things like putting proposals together and working as a team to create that content. In the past, our bid teams, for example, to put the review responses together, we'd have to do things like amalgamate 20 different attachments that were sent over email the 11th hour before a bid was due and put together that master document before it could be submitted. Things like that not only just add to your daily stress that you don't necessarily need, but really prevented us from being as productive as we could. And really that takes our time and our energy away from focusing on what's most important, which is all of you today, which is our clients. So I started sharing this slide pre-COVID days. So all these stats you see are all before the pandemic hit us. Really what I'd say is that I think we could probably all agree that we've blown these right out of the water. A third of the meetings are virtual in nature. Well, no, that's 3 out of 3, in my opinion anyways, at least in our experience, for example. Now, as we start thinking about going back to the office, some of you may have. We haven't yet done that for many of our colleagues as well, but we're in the process of looking at when's the right timing and so on. I think the piece to remember is that our workplaces, as we know it, has ultimately changed as well. So many spaces, including our head office that I'm parked in almost all by myself here today, is have been created to be open and flexible floor plans. Ideally to promote communications and collaboration with colleagues, for example. Yet now, when people come back to work, we need to make sure we're maintaining 6 feet apart and put barriers up between us. So what's that going to do to that in-person collab that we once had? I think the times are already different, right? When we talk about tools, an interesting stat from a report from Microsoft was that on average, meeting attendees attend at least 10 meetings in a week. Out of all those meetings, 60% of them walked away feeling stressed or dissatisfied with their meeting or found it unproductive. Now, in our case, to make matters worse, a number of years ago, and some of our account managers on the phone could probably relate to this, but we have, as a provider and a reseller, we had access to a lot of partner tools. So of course, what did our conferencing look like? We had WebEx, Skype for Business, GoToMeetings, we had been piloting Teams, and I was even being pushed to add Zoom into the mix. So you can imagine this really left us with an inconsistent collaboration experience. A real challenge for us as our support teams to support that, and worse than that, ultimately kind of leaving our staff on their own to figure out which tools are the right fit for which, and nobody really became a master of any one tool because we had too many of them. What I will say though, that really meant we've done a heck of a pilot of many UC platforms in the past couple of years. So if I look at the bright side to all of that, that's I think the one thing we got out of it. If I switch gears a little bit, I'm a big believer in time management and the value of finding ways that we can be more productive. We spend so much time doing routine tasks that are very much with opportunity for automating some of them. And worse than that, when you're working on those tasks, we have to switch gears all the time, whether it's from an interruption from a coworker or when we're in the office, the knock at the door or somebody coming to chat with you when they're in the middle of focusing on something. And really having to switch gears and losing that focus, which just slow us down and slow our productivity down. So now I know this saying is getting a bit overused today, but we really are living in what's a new normal. This means as IT departments, we really need to adapt. Whether it's deploying equipment now in users' homes instead of a corporate office environment, finding ways to do that safely and securely, or just even how to make sure that these devices out in the field are managed and deployed and secured so that we trust that, that our data is safe and that we're not compromising any of our information. So that leads us into a term that Microsoft calls zero trust. This could be its own webinar unto itself, so I'm not going to go out and spend a lot of time on this. But I think the key message is really, you know, if I put it simply, often we assume that just as long as that device is behind a corporate firewall or is managed by us in some way, which usually just means that we're patching it, maybe we have antivirus and some agents on it, that it must be safe. So I'd like to challenge each of you on the call today to think about it. And what are we really trying to protect? But that's our data. And there's three main factors that we think about to make sure that whenever we access data, it would be considered a secure access. First off is our identity. We need to make sure you are who you say you are when you go to log in, your password wasn't compromised. Then we also need to be able to trust that device. Is it healthy? Does it have malware on it? Does it meet our corporate standards for things like disk encryption or any of the other policies that we might want to apply? And then lastly, where are you coming from? If all of those things are good, then we should let you into the data. So that's, you know, at a really high level, that's the idea of zero trust and the way we need to start thinking about remote access to our tools. Also understanding that this data no longer lives in your perimeter inside of your corporate office. In many cases, as with Modern Workplace and O365, it's living in the cloud, it's living in Microsoft. So why are we still protecting how we always did it? So jumping a little bit more into how we got there, you know, unlike many organizations that are, probably many of you on the call today, we originally sold the idea of moving to Office 365 specifically to get rid of our expensive on-premise Exchange server environment. We had high availability set up, multiple servers, both in Burnaby and redundant and replicating to our Edmonton location. I can honestly say it was one of our biggest time sucks as an operations inside of Microserve. So from there, that was our first win that got us there. Then we looked at SharePoint Online, which was just a natural fit for us. We had a legacy version of SharePoint on-premise that needed to go away, and essentially under that same license umbrella, we could migrate it. So that was what we focused on next. We picked up all of that legacy SharePoint environment, put it up onto SharePoint Online. Almost overnight at that point, really what I want to highlight is we almost instantly transformed our teams to be able to co-author documents. I'll never forget sort of the first moments in the 11th hour before a massive proposal was due the next day. It's 11 p.m. at night, and seeing a dozen of our team all online editing the same file at the same time. And even cooler than that, I could click on somebody and identify where their cursor was and what they were typing in real time. Now, theoretically, you could do co-authoring back in the on-premise version of the SharePoint, but I think we all know it never really worked the way it was intended. So that was our first sort of big boon in productivity, and got rid of things like our manual version control, for example, and brought us a lot of efficiencies. What happened next, though, we had a big wake-up call right around here, where our roughly 10-year-old voice over IP telephony environment went down one night. So we were lucky in that we managed to get it back up, but it really highlighted that technical debt that was looming for us, and we needed to do something about this. Again, as I mentioned, we've got a help desk and a contact center that we have SLAs with our clients on. That can't be down. So, not unlike many of your organizations, we had to follow a formal procurement process, as we should for due diligence. We embarked on a unified communications RFP, and the interesting part there was really many of the responses that came back. I'd say, even though we put a lot of emphasis on unified communications, when it came back, many of the proposals we got were essentially a telephony solution with some ideas on how to bolt into a web conferencing tool or online meetings, for example. Luckily, one of the latecomers in our process, though, got us to more the vision that we had in mind, which is essentially looking at Teams for calling. And I'm happy to say that in the end, we were able to present that business case back to Spud, our president, and confirm that Teams calling was going to be our telephony environment as well. So that's been the journey we've been on. Last fall was when we officially killed off on-premise Skype, migrated to Skype for Business Online as a very quick step, and got us natively into using Teams. So we've been on Teams for chat and meetings heavily since last September. And timed ironically very, very close to COVID, we had been piloting and we're launching our implementations of Teams calling already in February. So really, no matter how you spin it, Microsoft 365 Suite really met the diverse needs of all of our different teams and gives an integrated solution that's built from the ground up with security in mind. What I really love with it is the fact that essentially we have one platform that gives us one set of tools for that security and compliance. So I'm not looking at a piecemeal solution with different tools depending on which app we're using, different areas that we have to look at governance, for example. Now, taking that one step further, as we start talking about security, if there's anything that I really did uncover as we went through this journey was, into what we like to think of as modern management. It is essentially how simple security can be when it is integrated right down to the hardware layer. So Microsoft's term for this is from cloud to chip. Is that whole thought process that our security layers that we're playing in Azure and Microsoft 365 can then natively connect into a device like Surface that gives us the advantage of making it simple to do a lot of the things that we had to do on premise with a whole bunch of tools before. So the big ones I want to highlight today for sure are starting with autopilot for Surface. So being able to very easily and very seamlessly deploy a device like this simply by shipping it to the end user. Having it auto-registered in Intune, and the first time that user signs in, our policies get applied. Maybe it upgrades the license from Pro to Enterprise. Any of the things that we needed to do, it's doing. And even layering the apps down. So what we think about of imaging of the past is essentially a dead concept. Really where the world is heading is to autopilot, and I think it's one of the biggest time savers that I've seen in my entire career around desktop management and finally negating that need to have a big image to deploy that we spend so much time and effort on. Some of the other cool parts native to Surface in this are the fact that we can do things like Intune UFI bias management. So maybe you've got one team that the policy is they cannot turn on their camera. Maybe they're in an R&D department and you don't want stuff in the background popping up in front of them. So you could control a policy specific to that set of users through this tool that is forcing those machines to have their camera disabled the first time they log in. Then maybe we decide to change that. Well, we can change that, move them between policies and now re-enable that camera, no matter where that device is. Doesn't matter if it's in your office or anywhere else, for example. So if we get into what our results are around this, I think my favorite way, if we start with Teams, is to think of Teams sort of as the tool that pulls together all of the unique components of Office 365 and essentially give us a single hub that enables us to effectively communicate and collaborate. Finally, I think my biggest point here is getting our work that's so heavily weighted to working in our inboxes out into a tool that allows us to organize our thoughts, keep it simple to understand where your files are stored, how to get to them, not spend all our time searching for that information. Now, where this gets even better though, is because we're 100% cloud-based now, it means that no matter where we are, as long as we have internet, we can have calls with our clients, we can facilitate meetings, and collaborate with our teams without ever even leaving this Teams app. Now, I'll be honest with you that Microserve historically has very much had an in-person office culture. Essentially that's how we connect with our coworkers and build that sense of community that we have and our working spirit as an organization. Now, overnight, I can say without a doubt that Teams is essentially what kept that culture intact as we suddenly transitioned to a digital world, sending everybody from home. My personal example around this would be, a concept where I really find that in my role, I work heavily with a lot of our technical folks. One of the things that we often end up doing is huddling in one of our boardrooms with a whiteboard behind us so that we can, grab a pen, draw a network diagram, yeah, I don't think that'll work, scribble it out, and 3 or 4 of us are all sitting there doing that. And prior to this, when somebody was remote, usually best case that meant somebody held up the cell phone and pointed the camera at them at the whiteboard while they were doing that, which didn't really lend itself to a good collab experience for that remote guest trying to participate. Now, on the flip side to that, I've personally been a diehard tablet pen user on a Windows device for roughly 15 years. And the biggest challenge I've always had, well, I live daily in OneNote for everything I've done for all of that time, and I can search 15 years worth of my notes. I've never been able to effectively do it with a team before. So I'm happy to say that I can truly do that again, and it no longer matters if we're in the office in a whiteboard. We can all be working from home as long as we have a device that's modern, that's supporting that touch and collaborative experience using Whiteboard or Microsoft OneNote, for example. Really, I think the way that I'd sum it up is that for once, technology isn't inhibiting our ability to collaborate and innovate together. So, as this relates to pandemic and our response to it, I'm never going to forget that March 7th date on a Sunday when I get this email from Spud literally saying, hypothetically, if we can get at least 30 of our staff working from home, can we do that? So obviously, lengthy back and forth started, what's going to work, what's not, is this feasible? And ironically, within 10 days of that, we sent 150 staff home. So to be able to react that fast was unbelievable. Now, what you'll see here, though, is ironically, before all this happened, we had already cut about 60 pilot users over to Teams Voice, and we were heading down that path. Ironically, maybe not quite fast enough. But we escalated that entire project. We cut over our contact center, finished cutting over our staff, and by the end of April, we successfully had transitioned every Microserve phone number into Teams calling. So now as we look beyond that, our focus on things like adoption, security, and ways to improve what we're leveraging with this through the modern workplace. And I mentioned autopilot before. Now, we've been for probably almost 2 years in a state where we have SCCM for desktop management on premise, and we've done co-management with Intune. So we've already been on a path to transition some of those services into more modern management. Our driver here as we move forward is to essentially disconnect SCCM on premise, move all of the functionality we're doing, specifically our biggest one being around imaging, and transition natively to autopilot. What that means is that our support teams aren't going to have to come back to the office when a new hire happens in the middle of the pandemic. We'll be able to provision that user. We're going to be able to get that machine shipped direct to them. We have never unboxed, set up, spent all that time layering an image on, only to find out the drivers are broken, all the things that we had to go through before. when that device gets shipped there and the first time they go to sign in, Intune takes over, Autopilot takes over, all of your policies, your apps get deployed, all that kind of thing. So that's really where our focus is becoming. Now, I did throw a couple quotes in here. And the first one, I will say Mike actually did give me his approval to put that one down there. But when I first came in to get ready for this event a couple weeks ago, when he was asking me, so what are you coming in for? We had a good chat around this. Now, Mike's been our staple guy holding down the fort here in our head office. So he's been here every day all by himself in the pandemic for the most part. And as we got chatting about this, he goes on to tell me that last week he was so excited because for the first time ever, he's in on a call over Teams with Spud. Spud asked to share the spreadsheet with him so they could work on it together. Mike knew right away how to click, open up a spreadsheet. They shared a screen together, and for the first time ever, actually collaborated on it. And he was so excited. That was kind of his end statement to that. So, I think the key message, often when we think about deploying new technology, especially big and scary things like telephony and unified communications, we often really associate this, or at least we, the IT folk do, around waiting for that inevitable spike in support requests, maybe having to make another hire or somebody to administer the new solution, whatever the case might be, but it's usually a, uh-oh, what's coming and what's hitting us and how are we going to make sure we're resourced for it. What I will really say there is you look at the UCC stack under Microsoft, the fewer moving parts that we have in that collaboration platform, the simpler the support model actually becomes. I can't stress enough how much of value that this really has. Somehow we're actually communicating more effectively and collaborating more than we ever have before as an organization, yet we're actually making it simpler to support and ultimately more secure. So if you don't believe my subjective comments to it, I'd be more than happy to share out. But Forrester's done a number of total economic impact studies around this, and proving some of the ROI, the payback periods and things like that, that if anybody's interested, we can absolutely share out some of that content as well. Now, if I'm totally honest, when Surface first hit the industry, and Microsoft announced they're getting into hardware, it took me a little while to come around to that. In the early years, I was probably even almost a bit of a naysayer with it, going, oh man, now we have one more manufacturer that we need to learn how to, adapt the drivers to our imaging processes for all of our customers, learn their tools, all that stuff was going, oh, I don't want to have to deal with this, right? Really, I started buying into it as I watched my customer bases grow and start learning their feedback around this. And about a year ago, I picked up this device, the Surface Go. And I took it on vacation with me to Europe. So just days after buying it, getting it up and running, taking it with me, and I thought I'd actually give it a try. I've never gone on vacation before without my paranoia setting in and always bringing my giant, primary device, my big laptop with me, just in case that something blows up that I need to help with, right? So I brought the Go instead. And ironically, I wasn't pulling it up for any of those work reasons. I managed 3 weeks in Europe with no work popping up for the most part. But what I did find out really quickly is that I couldn't believe how good the sound quality was. So when I got into using it, I actually very quickly was using it as my entertainment device. So what I watch at home on Netflix is absolutely my Go. And my iPad literally has probably almost been a year that it hasn't powered in or checked in with Intune, for example. So I'm almost ready to sell it off or donate it somewhere. Now, as I mentioned before, usually my primary machine, being the techie that I am and always wanting to run VMs and do other things, and I've always had some kind of behemoth laptop. Usually for me that meant, my carrying case involved wheels on it so that I could lug the thing around without breaking my back. Last February, so literally right before COVID, I decided to take the plunge. Shelly convinced me enough that I should really move myself to the Surface Pro 7. So I stood that up, reset up my home environment. Ironically, it was perfect timing, but I can honestly say that for the last 4 months, I haven't once felt the need to do all the other things that I used to do out of that big bag on wheels, like pulling out my speaker puck, plugging it into the laptop, setting up an external camera. all those things that kind of tethered me to my work from home desk at home to collaborate and to be on calls together. What I realized really quickly was that the microphone quality, the sound quality, the video quality, just native to the device, including this Go, was so good I didn't need any of those peripherals. So that's really when I started buying into the feel for that. Now, really where this makes a difference is the fact that we are working from home. You know, up into the past few weeks, I haven't seen this office in almost 3 months. So what I find now when I'm working at home because of that, my experience is I'm in the office 1 minute on a video call with some colleagues or a client. The kids decide that they're going to move into the office and start playing, and they're being loud. I pick up my device and I walk out of the room and I go find somewhere else. Or maybe I just want to catch a glimpse because the sun came out and I want to go sit outside in the backyard while the sun's shining. So all of those things I can do because the quality of the voice never suffers. I'm not worried about the quality and tethering in by having to plug stuff in and try and cart a bunch of gear around the house with me. So, you know, I mentioned earlier that I've been a pen touch guy for many, many years. So I'd like to almost think of myself as a bit of a connoisseur in the types of device that I've used. I've tried almost all of them. Still almost sure my left bicep is bigger than my right from lugging my giant tablet around back 15 years ago. But I love that experience of being able to write and use a device electronically and be able to search my notes and things like that. What I can honestly say, though, is the Surface is by far the closest likeness to pen on paper experience. Not only just from how it touches and it feels, but you know, the physical form factor and shape for it. When I pull off the keyboard and I just decide I'm going to start writing on the device, the experience doesn't match any other pen that I've used before. It's that much better. So with that, I'm going to enlist Ash, and we're going to do just a quick demo into Teams and a little bit of the power that comes with the modern workplace from being able to do, you know, integrate touch into our daily process. So with that, Ash, do you want to jump in and take control?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Nigel. And hi, everyone. So I'll actually quickly show you how Teams looks on my end for those of you who are new to Teams and have never seen how it looks like before. So here we go. So as you can see, this is how my interface looks like. And here we have, so I will just briefly explain you what are the items that are existing on the navigation menu over here. So we have activity feed here. Actually, this is a summary of everything that's happened within the channels that you're part of or even within the chats. And you would even, you would get like all the at mentions, or even if someone liked your message or if someone has directly tagged you, you would see all of those notifications over here. Then we have the chat. So chat is like the most common function that I use because I interact with a lot of people from other departments. So I frequently have one-on-one conversations. So this is a place where I do that. And even if I want to chat with a small group, I would just come into chat and do that. And then we have Teams. So Teams is pretty much like a common gathering place. And so wherein if we want to send org-wide communication to Teams, Nigel would be explaining that in detail to you. And then we have calendar. So calendar is actually connected to your Outlook calendars. In other words, when you actually schedule a meeting in Outlook, it shows up on Teams and vice versa. So as you can see all the meetings that I'm part of, and I can even directly create a new meeting right away from here. Or if I quickly want to talk to Nigel about something, I can just click on Meet Now and invite him. And then we have calls. So calls actually support the basic phone system features. It's typically like how we would just pick up your phone to call your colleague or your team member to quickly ask a question. You can so here there is also an integrated dial pad. So if you want to talk to your clients and if they're not part of Teams, you can still do that over here. And then moving on to files. So this is actually all the recently accessed files and all the files that I've downloaded within Teams. So all of that shows up. So it's just like a one-stop place wherein I can access all the files that I'm part of or I'm working on right now. So that's pretty much about it. And over to you, Nigel.
Perfect. Thanks, Ash. So I'll share out my Teams window as well. Yeah, and I wanted to just give you a flavor or some ideas around usage of Teams. One of our earliest adopters was our managed services team. Really, this is what's become our virtual office. Every day we, the quick updates of, hey, I'm taking off for lunch, all the stuff what we usually do just over the shoulder happen in our general channel, for example. Quick questions to the team, you can see instant responses. We're not having to call a meeting or pick up a phone and dial somebody to get something quick. Kind of happens at your own pace and how you want to do it. We've also found, a number of different ways to integrate, at a pretty primitive level so far. But for example, I feed our ticket data every time a ticket gets escalated from our level 1 engineers. That ticket summaries end up in this channel. So it's a really quick way to jump in and step outside of our ticketing systems, answer something really quick, for example. We also then incorporate it into any of our huddle meetings that are going on. I won't open it to show you all our internal notes, but we have a OneNote tab up there, for example, that allows us to collaborate in all the different areas. What I really like about moving out of the inbox and into Teams is the fact that, as you can see, I'm a member of all sorts of teams within Microserve, that I can pick and choose which ones I need to look at hourly, by minute, daily, or whatever else that case may be, and that gives me the flexibility to do that. So with that, we've just launched, for our own internal training program development, we launched a new team recently. And Ash, if I hand you the keys, if we want to try it, we'll just show you a little bit of a collaboration experience that comes from this type of environment.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks, Nigel. Yeah, I'll go ahead and share my screen. So as you can see here, so I'm within the Teams. And this is like the training program development channel over here. And I usually work with Nigel on collaborating with documents, and I would often like him to review and give me feedback on it. So
Actually,
I just
quick one, I think your screen share might not have kicked in.
Oh, okay. Can you see it now? Yeah.
It's coming. Oh, there we go.
Okay, so here it is. So back to what I was telling. So this is my team's channel right over here. So I recently just worked on a document and I want to get Nigel's feedback on it. So what I would do is I would just go in right over here, mention Nigel, and would just type in a comment. Could you review the doc? Just send that to him. So right now he would just get a notification popped up on his Teams. And what I would do is I would just go on to the Word document and open it from my end. So right now I'm open it on my local desktop, but once Nigel joins in, you can actually see that even he's part of the document and even he's working on the document. So yeah, so right here it gives me a notification that Nigel Brown is over here.
Okay.
Yeah, and yeah, as you can see, it even tells me he's on page 1. So I can track. If he's doing something wrong to my document, I can put the blame on him.
There you go. I would never do that, would I? And then quickly, I'll share out. So this is where the pen experience starts to come into play. So I look at this document. It's a good outline that I see so far. All that makes sense to me. I start using ink as a part of, how I'm going to review it. If Ash is good with whatever I say, then she can obviously delete the inking that I add. But let's see, maybe my question is, how much detail are you expecting? So maybe that's my first comment. I've forgotten, I like to use my red pen for this. Up at the top, I realized that she's not using our branding. So I'm going to mention insert branding here. You guys have to excuse my bad handwriting in the demo. So you can see how you can weave in sort of that collaborative feel of just picking up a pen like it's a sheet of paper. Many of us, that's why we print papers, because it's nice to be able to grab a pen, mark it up, and just scribble notes on it to get that feel overall. So now if I'm done with this, maybe I'm going to close out. Now in this case, I opened directly in Word, but I launched it via Teams. So I'm going to share back over with you in 1 sec. Get my Teams console up. Then I'm going to jump back into that channel. And essentially how I could have done it, or the easiest way that I started with that you didn't see, was I just clicked on the document name. It opened that panel right away. And if I was just doing a quick preview, that might be all I need to do. When you get into touch and deeper editing, often I'll just click on Open in Desktop App, which is what I had done before. But now that I'm here and I've done my comments, oh, look at that. I already see that Ash said, 2 to 3 lines of detail. So right away I said, that sounds good to me. By clicking on the conversation that's built into Word in here, I actually start my message thread. And I can say, Ash, I'm going to mention her, oops. I'm going to mention her name so that she gets notified. If I didn't do that, she wouldn't necessarily see the notification right away. But by saying, Ash, looks good, a few, basically that finished our collab process for editing a document. So as you can see, kind of weaves into the natural workflow, allows us to collaborate in real time. And then the cool part is when I close out of that Word doc and I go back to my chat, that whole conversation thread that I had is essentially all connected here, tied to when Ash first shared out and announced that document. So with that, I will stop sharing on this machine again. Set back up. So our next quick piece of a demo, what we're going to do, and sorry, my automatic lights turned themselves off. That if we integrate this into how we'd use a hub, imagine Ash. Now, normally what I do, if we had that, we could have had that same collaborative experience. And this kind of maybe I'm asking her in Teams, can we look at that Teams training session that we were going to do together? Normally speaking, what I would do, if I wasn't already in this event where I'm connected, I would come into here, probably just use Teams on the left, do a meet now, invite Ash to start my dialogue. Because I'm already presenting and sharing, I'm not going to do that for you today, but imagine Ash and I start a call to start collaborating. Her at home on her Surface Pro 7 and myself on the hub. So I can jump over here. No, actually, I'll show you. So one tab shows me just the open windows, or I can come up into my start menu, which you're not seeing. Now you should be. When I hit start, I have instant access to a couple of things. First thing I'm going to do in this case, we're going to open Whiteboard to share out where we've been collaborating, brainstorming a little bit. And I'll get rid of my presentation for a moment. Right away, you see sort of my workspace of all my my whiteboard pages. These get created endlessly. Now, Ash and I already did a little bit of collab a while ago on this one. So in this case, we have a whiteboard started. So I'm going to go ahead and open this. And what you'll see is, once it opens, up in the top right, I can see who's been invited to share this whiteboard with me. The really cool part is you get into the feeling with the hub. This is an endless whiteboard that goes in every direction all the time. So I can move it around, I can keep creating content, I can scroll forever. But more importantly is that whole ability to collaborate wherever we are. So you can see Ash as a participant. If I click Add, I can open that up. Now right away, this is where some of that O365 AI and intelligence starts coming in, where it knows, maybe I want to invite all of you to this whiteboard right now. If I click on that, I'd be adding your attendees to it. Or it looks at whoever I recently communicated with, for example. So it's incredibly smart that I actually have found very rarely do I ever need to search for the contact and add them, unless it's somebody I haven't talked to in a year. So in this case, Ash has already joined, and looks like she's added content from when we first mapped out the agenda flow for a team session. So I'm gonna zoom in a little bit. I like her content. Go grab my pen. And in here, the one thing I do see under features is, as she showed you, that, oops, move it around, that calling is there. Sorry, my handwriting's bad. And then maybe I'm going to jump in here and think of some best practices. What are some of the ideas that I might have? Now imagine, Ash, we're having a collaborative dialogue while we're doing this. And I can see Ash is writing there, going calling. She's going to create 2 slides. Okay, yeah, that sounds great to me. And then maybe, whoops. Let's try this again. Best practices, what do we want to show? Oops. There's a touch on there. I want to show, you know, teams versus one-on-one chat. So it gives you just an idea of how oops, no, I'm writing what I didn't mean to, that we can collaborate, especially with this, we could be interacting over video on a call and have that dialogue. Actually, looks like to me you've got a good game plan for your team's intro session. Oh yeah, that's a great one too. I like that idea about mentions. So yeah, so that just gives you a taste of how you can collaborate, work together, and go back and forth and things like this. Now with that, I'll switch gears. We're going to go back into our slides. And I'm still sharing, so you guys should see that. So if we wrap up sort of the use of Hub and Touch woven in with Surface devices at home or devices with pen, is that essentially, especially with the Hub, you think of something that's traditional. Like in a workplace, we almost always have a whiteboard. You know, that's how we've always collaborated in an office. So we've taken that traditional feel of a workspace, you know, this physical device I can walk up to, I can just touch. The coolest part though, I can use it right away. I can sign in as myself, and when I do that, right away it finds all my most recently opened files, which was probably all the stuff I want to collaborate on when I walked into this environment, and just start working. I can do a meet now, or I can join a meeting and integrate all of sort of the modern workplace technology into a seamless experience to collaborate better. Now, one of the other things that we really uncovered as we went into Teams and this whole modern workplace concept, and I challenge each of you to think about, you know, when we talk about why are our meetings bad, you know, we didn't have an agenda, we didn't know why we were meeting, it took 20 minutes to get started, all of those things. If you think about the meeting context, what would make a meeting better isn't that 1 hour that you have. It's the context of what are you doing before the meeting? Is everybody being heard while you're having the meeting? And then what's your follow-up activity look like? And as in the world of Teams, as we've adopted this more and more, now in that meeting invite, we'll actually open up the Teams chat, maybe even the day before. So I'm using this more and more, or I'm actually starting to chat with my attendees. Maybe I'm asking, you know, for agenda items prior to, so that we have a good agenda when we walk into that. We know what we should be talking about together. Maybe we actually want to upload that file that we need to work on together and collaborate a little bit in the meeting before we start it. Then obviously all the stuff that we do during that meeting gives us that co-authoring experience. You know, doing things like I've showed with Whiteboard or OneNote, for example, and integrating it into the meeting. And then after that meeting, where's our meeting recording? It's in the same place that we had the meeting. You know, an instant click to get to it. You're not downloading a file and then having it upload it somewhere else. It's already there in your console. So it really gives the easy access to go through, to maybe replay that meeting, see the transcription from it, adding notes, meeting notes, if they're stored in OneNote, for example, can all be in that same place. So really, I think it's more than just the meeting itself or a video conferencing tool when you look at it end-to-end holistically about the rest of the workflow before and after a meeting. And then lastly, I couldn't help but put up probably one of the favorite quotes I've heard from Satya, the CEO of Microsoft. You know, he said 2 years of digital transformation in 2 months. I absolutely believe that that was the case. This is Microserve's internal live data, and you can watch our usage. Now, we've been on Teams since September, and you can see this goes all the way back to January, so this is a 90-day graph. You know, we had usage pretty good, wasn't too bad, and then March hits. And we more than doubled that spike of our usage of Teams. This is what enabled us to suddenly be working from home and still feel like we're part of a team. Over on the right, we've got some interesting stats. You know, in purple, this is all of the audio calls that have come into Teams. What I should mention here is I actually pulled this from a Power BI dashboard template that was a free download, and in 10 minutes, I had more visibility into all all of what we're using Teams for, what it looks like, our usage patterns, number of calls, call quality issues, all of that stuff. In 10 minutes, I had the most beautiful looking dashboard there, of which I only grabbed a few screenshots, but it blew my mind about how much detail I could get. You can watch in April, as we fully transitioned over to Teams Voice, that calling went through the roof. What you can't read right there is that that's 10,000 calls in the month of April that we placed over Teams. The orange is video calls. So you can see actually in March, we started a bit slow. We were just starting to adapt video, and then it shot up again by the time April and May hit. I think now as we watch this progress, we're gonna see that trend only going up right now. So where does Microserve help? How can we potentially have a conversation with any of you? The reality is, depends on where you're at. If you just want to know a little bit more, by all means, reach out to your account manager, or myself included, or anybody really that you're coming into contact with today, and we can connect you with the right resources. So whether that's a consultation around Teams or Surface Specialist specifically, or maybe want to do something around the art of the possible about how you integrate some of what we showed today, but in much more detail around usage of a pen, modern devices, and how they come into the workplace, and how you look at even modern deployment, for example. And then we get into project-based services. So if you're looking for help to figure out where you are on that journey, we kind of break it up into 4 major buckets. First being anything around deployment, security, governance, kind of whether it's starting with an assessment process to just figure out where are you on your journey through unified communications and what does that look like for you. Are you ready for Teams? Some of that type of behavior, or maybe it's actually jumping right into deployment services or looking at some of those foundational components that also need to be at play. Where teams like Ash come into play would be around education user adoption. Is the biggest thing that we found is that the tools are actually pretty easy. That deployment stuff, while not simple, is so much easier than it's ever been before. Where we should start spending our time is on change management user adoption. This is the biggest one that we've still got a long journey ahead of us around how we continue to use this better. Then we can also have conversations about how to get into calling. And lastly, we already have a mature audio-visual practice that deploys room solutions of any kind. Teams, rooms, and devices would just be one of those in their mix. But we're definitely up to the task of supporting any of the Teams enabled Surface Hub deployments, that sort of thing as well. Now, many of you think of Microserve, often think of sort of the end user compute specialists. We know how to do logistics and deployments at large scale better than probably anybody in Western Canada. We have been modernizing approach to that. We still have all the support that we do for the forecasting and stocking of products into our warehouse to make sure you've always got products available when you need to look at your deployments, to doing config imaging through our tech centers. We can also now weave this into a modern deployment methodology, leveraging autopilot, and we can even help you implement into an autopilot should that be the journey you're looking for as well. But as we do that, product still comes into Microserve, lives in our warehouse, that you've got the stock you need when you need it. But then instead of doing an image, we do what's called a white glove autopilot process. So we pre-provision that device. So it's already been registered, apps come down, policies are on that machine, and then we can send it out to your user base, which could even involve users at home these days. As we get into that world, the provisioning of the deployment process gets simplified so much. So for the clients that are headed down that path, that entire ecosystem of how we get hardware and devices to users and how do we enable them on day one to be effective, that's sort of that key message there. And then lastly, for those of you that maybe are really interested in Teams, but don't have the expertise and aren't looking at building it out, then we have a suite of services around managed services where you can offload that work to us, and we can be an extension of your IT team, for example. Obviously, what we're talking about today is but a piece of the broader service portfolio on Microserve. I'm not going to touch really any of these points today, but if you're interested in any of these other areas or having a conversation, we're certainly more than willing to do so. And with that, thanks everybody for your time on presenting, and we'll turn it open the floor up to question and answer.
Thank you, Nigel. We've got a couple of questions already in the chat. I would encourage customers as we are getting to the Q&A section to continue either coming off mute to ask your question live or ask your question in the chat room. So the first question is for Marcus, Nigel. That might require some of the folks at Microsoft as well on the line. Is there an option to use Microsoft Whiteboard on Android?
That's a good question. I know, so Teams app is absolutely supported on Android. So natively through that, my only challenge is you can see I'm an iPhone guy. So I don't use an Android every day, but I do know absolutely Android is supported for Teams app. And if you have Teams app, then you can use the Power Whiteboard from within Teams. For the full Whiteboard app, iOS definitely does, but
it is as well on Android. So the Whiteboard application, which is the same application that you're seeing Nigel use on the Microsoft Surface Hub, is available for free at the Microsoft Store online. So you can download that for iOS or Android. It is also been made available through the Teams Android app as well. So you can launch it either as a separate application, or now you can actually launch it directly through the Teams application as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now is Shelley from Microsoft helping us out. And thank you, Marcus, for asking the question. The next question is from John. Might be a takeaway question, Nigel. Can Teams integrate with project management tools such as Asana?
Yeah, so you're right on the takeaway point, because Asana specifically I've never leveraged before. But what I can say is that Teams has a huge third-party app ecosystem and native APIs. If you want to look at any custom dev, for example, many of which means you can natively plug in the Teams app, that third-party app into Teams. Asana, I'd have to do a search for. So we can maybe get back to you on that one in particular and see if it does. But many integrations do exist already today. And anything I saw from the Microsoft Build Developer Conference is they're making leaps and bounds towards making it easier for developers to dive on board and do things in Teams.
Thank you, Nigel.
You bet.
Any other questions live or online? We're 5 minutes from our predetermined time. All right. It looks like we do not have any additional questions. So thank you very much for your attendance. And we'll be sending a recording of this session from our marketing team. So thank you very much, everybody, and have a great rest of your day.
Yes, thanks very much, everybody. Hope that gave you some additional details.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Microsoft team.
All right. Thanks everyone. Good one.